Hello and welcome to a special edition. I'm François Picard, a special edition we're calling The World in 2019. Our look at the year ahead with Lara Marlowe, Paris correspondent for the Irish Times. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. How are you, François?
Welcome back as well to Hamdan Mustafavi, editor-in-chief of Courrier International. How did we translate it? The Global Post?
Global Post?
But that's a Canadian publication.
Yeah. Or Global Times is a Chinese one. But
It's a capsule of all the best from the world's press, including cartoons, photos, and it's translated into French.
Yeah.
Would you say translated or adapted?
Adapted and translated, and we have both kind of things on the website too.
Okay. And Craig Kopitas is with us, editor-at-large for TRT World. How are you?
Mon capitaine.
As well as Georg Blume, Paris correspondent for Die Zeit. Are you publishing over the holidays?
Yes.
Okay. The news watch never stops. Throughout the year, you can join the conversation on Facebook and Twitter, #WorldThisWeek. Will 2019 be the year of Brexit? I know that's what's written on paper, but not much has gone to script since the UK voted out of the European Union back in June of 2016. On the day Theresa May decided to postpone the UK Parliament's vote on the divorce deal, the leader of the opposition was left to ask the question, when?
We've had a meaningful vote. We had it in the referendum on 2016. And if he wants a meaningful date, I'll give him one. 29th of March 2019, when we leave the European Union.
Lara Marlowe, when is this happening, in fact?
Good question, François. I personally, and this is just a hunch, and it's not empirical because you cannot be empirical about Brexit because it is the biggest mess we've ever seen. I don't think it's going to happen. I think there will be a second referendum. Theresa May has now postponed the parliamentary vote on her negotiated plan until January. There's a lot of pressure. Her own party is torn apart between Remainers and Leavers and so on and so forth. I think there'll be a second referendum. The question then is, will there be 2 choices or 3 choices? If the choice is Remain or Leave, all the polls indicate that they will stay, that the Remain vote is much, much greater than the Leave voter. If there are 3 choices, which are Remain, Leave, or accept her negotiated exit, then it becomes very dodgy and uncertain.
But there's this mantra that's been picked up ever since
Brexit
Ireland...
means breakfast.
No, but ever since Ireland was asked to re-vote on a referendum where they didn't approve the Treaty of Lisbon.
Absolutely.
The rest of Europe has been saying, look, if we don't...
it's not democracy.
It's not democracy if we're told to answer the question until we get the right answer.
You know, the funny thing is that in France, the 2005 referendum on the constitutional treaty had devastating results. In the Gilets jaunes riots, people told me over and over and over again, we voted against it, and the crooks, they imposed it on us anyway. In Ireland, where they had to re-vote twice, not once, but twice, there's no problem, and people love the EU. In Britain, I think the argument will be the majority who voted for Brexit didn't realize what they were doing. They didn't realize the consequences of it. They were sold a lie. Boris Johnson told them, this will be painless, we'll regain our sovereignty, our economy will boom, and now they see that simply was not true.
Do you agree with Lara that we may not have a Brexit at all?
I think there should be some politician with some guts that should tell the British people that it can't be done. It just can't be done. I mean, so many people working on it around the clock to try to find a deal. It can't be done. If it's not done yet, it's because it can't be. It's too much.
Or they could sleepwalk into a no-deal Brexit.
Yeah, but it's like the economies are so intertwined. There is so many levels of cooperation. How do you get out of that?
The Bank of England says that the currency will fall at least 8%.
Oh, but that's Project Fear, say the politicians.
Yeah, but the Bank of, if you can't have faith in your main institutions like the Bank of England, who do you believe?
But even if they do Brexit, I mean, if the British economy falls down, if the Scots wants to go, if the Irish, I don't know, start to riot, what's going to be left of England anyway? So I think they should now say, let's either revote or do a parliament vote or just be realistic.
There's no silver bullet, is there, Guillaume Blume?
I mean, with all these problems, it's good news for Europe. It's good news for the EU. It's such a mess to get out, and you know, if the British are even thinking about coming back, you know, it would give a tremendous boost to the European Union. And
if they did come back, would they be able to have, you know, that special deal that Margaret Thatcher carved out, the rebate and all this?
I think they would even be more resilient, or not they would even be tame, probably, you know, and let us do things which we never could have done with them before.
Craig Capitas?
Well, my greatest concern about Brexit is how them leaving the European Union will impact the terms of the Treaty of Westphalia. Frankly,
careful. That's what means that Alsace is French. So
there
careful where you tread.
There are implications here. Anyone in England who says they understand Brexit is like the person who says, "I don't get drunk on champagne." Never believe anything they say. I believe you're right. I think there will be another vote, and I would recommend our audience look at. Very arch-conservative, retired now, Michael Hazeltine. He made a comment a few weeks ago, pointing out that 70% of the young people in the UK want to remain. And it's all these old folks who are keeping them there, you know, grumpy old men and women. Well, they need another vote because basically, frankly, I think anyone over the age of, what do we say, 55 in England should not be allowed to vote in Brexit. Just no way. You're not allowed. No, it's got to be under 55. That's not a bad political solution.
Hamdan Mustafavi is shaking her head in agreement.
Yeah, actually,
Not
I go to England a lot, and I've been talking with young English people, and they're devastated by that because they feel like the older people, they got all the opportunities that Europe gave them, and they just took it away from them just at the time that they were going to have the...
And in the eye of the storm is Theresa May. And what a year she's had. There was Donald Trump praising Boris Johnson during that joint press conference at Chequers. And then there was that EU snub at Salzburg at a summit. And this, she stays on message each time, this time confronting European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker at a December summit in Brussels. You called me nebulous. No, I didn't. I called your policies nebulous. And there you see Mark Rutte, the Dutch Prime Minister, who breaks it up. That pool cameraman is the unsung hero of 2018 because that is a brilliant shot. Some calling it Scorsese-like. But what do you make of Theresa May through all this? Because one week we think she's hapless and over her head, and the next we think, oh, maybe she is playing the clock right, and maybe she will get her way.
I think she's kind of flying blind. The British were calling her Theresa Maybe for a very long time. I think she's probably criticized more than she merits, but at the same time, you don't have the impression she really has a grand plan for anything. I sort of feel sorry for her, and I only learned recently, you know, she's a diabetic. She has to give herself insulin injections several times a day. I mean, you can imagine, you know, with the health problems she has, the divided, very, very divided, internally at war with itself Tory party that she's in charge of. She has one of the most difficult jobs in the world, and she's actually shown a lot of grace under pressure, despite all these difficulties. Now, that doesn't make up for the lack of a grand vision. I agree. And she needs to really figure out what she's doing and stick to it and push it through.
Why isn't there this leadership deficit that we see? And it's going to be a question that comes up in the build-up to those European elections in May, Craig Capitas.
Boy, that's a damn good question, Francois. And I don't think any of us here really have an answer for that. I mean, who would want to get into this mess? Who would want to get into politics anymore in the UK?
What we like about, I mean, even May with all her problems, she's very good. In fact, she's doing a lot of work on the issues. She's not talking loosely. She's a woman. And, you know, if you ask about leadership in Europe, we had a leadership contest in Germany, just a very strong one, and the woman won.
Yeah.
Yes, and that gives us a lot of hope. If we keep to people like May, like Merkel, like AKK in Germany in the future, they are good they know what good governance is. They are maybe not the big leaders with a big charm. With
so we should elect Sophie Marceau president of France. I think that would be a.
No,
I don't think Theresa May is Sophie Marceau.
Some people see it that way. The recent election of within the conservative, the CDU in Germany, of Angela Merkel's anointed heir. Others, well, they look at Marine Le Pen or Matteo Salvini as the poster child for those European elections. Then again, meet, if you will, Katharina Schulze, the 33-year-old charismatic co-leader of the Bavarian Greens, a party that scored nearly 18% in last October's regional elections. And we're seeing it, by the way, not just in Germany, but also here in France, how the Greens could be the big winners in those elections in May. So the future is unwritten, Georg Blume.
I think we still have a very strong majority in Europe for democratic leadership. And so the future is written between, not by the extremes yet. I think we have some years left before they are really a real threat to power in Europe. Salvini and Orban, they are not yet there.
Craig Capidis, you agree with that?
I still don't. Having lived in Europe and covered Europe most of my adult life, I still have yet to discover the kind of similar DNA you see in America that would allow a European Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, or even a Barack Obama, or God help me, a Donald Trump, God, please no, become president. There is a very structured political class within Europe. In England, they all come out of Oxford. There have been a number of articles written on this in some British publications recently. In France, they all come out of the Grande École. And there's, not that the old, remember Jose Bové, not that he would ever become a politician, but that kind of person from the streets, from the barrio, a working class person in France.
Well, Angela Merkel has been a very impressive
leader. I was going to say Germany is the exception to the rule. Germany has been the exception to the rule. But you certainly don't see this in France. You don't see it in Italy. You don't see it in the UK, and you don't see it in Germany. And as we all live in France, I've the cradle of democracy and liberty and revolution. The French still always go back to the Grande École to select their president and their deputies.
I'm not saying they were great leaders, but neither François Hollande nor Nicolas Sarkozy went to the Grande École.
Oh, no, Hollande went to 3 Grandes.
Oh, you're right. He just didn't seem like
it. But Sarkozy did not.
Sarkozy did not and paid the price for it. But he was certainly no kind of... he was not of the spirit of a Barack Obama or an Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Or the kind of
this young congresswoman who's just been elected in the U.S.
in the United, and there's many other examples we could give, because it's great to see that green in Germany. Bless the.
I don't believe that Germany is an exception. I think we had elections in France where you always have a majority for the center Democratic Party.
Where are they?
Of course, Macron has them, and he has a stable government within the next year.
Suggest he's very unpopular. Polls suggest he's very unpopular. But if there was an election tomorrow, he would be in the second round.
Yes, and of course, you vote for Le Pen the first tour, and the second tour you give a reasonable vote.
Stop it with the Le Pen.
Yeah.
I have lived in this country for 30 years. And every other year, I hear, Le Pen is coming. The French will never elect a Le Pen. They are fascists.
That's what I'm saying.
Never. But we always bring these people up as the
Germany
bugaboo.
Being an exception.
Spend more time on finding the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortezes in this country and in the UK and elsewhere, and we'd be much better off.
Well, one thing is certain, change is coming to Latin America. 2019 will test the mettle of 2 very different new faces there. Left-wing political veteran Andrés Manuel López Obrador has only been in office a few weeks as Mexico's president. He's already announced, by the way, a hefty increase in the minimum wage as one of his first measures. Then at the other end of the spectrum, there's a far-right former army captain in Brazil who tapped into a nation's disgust with rampant corruption across the political spectrum. Jair Bolsonaro, who survived an assassination attempt on the campaign trail, has been likened to Donald Trump. You could say political and incorrectness were his two middle names.
My sons would never fall in love with a black woman. They were well educated. You called me a rapist, but I'm telling you now, I wouldn't rape you because you're not worthy of it. If a civilian or soldier is attacked and he fires 20 times at his assailant, he should be decorated and not be judged.
It's a bit like the discussion we had last week about Donald Trump. Oh, that's Bolsonaro, the candidate. What will Bolsonaro, the president, though, be like?
Well, we'll see that from January. It's very interesting to see that he's been elected on grounds that he's anti-corruption and is, very different from everybody in Brazil till now. But there's been lately a story about him paying, fake employees and turning money away. So I think it's just gonna bring to the light that it's just any other one of politicians. But it's interesting to see how we got into power and how Brazil's changed so much in a few years. There was an economic boom. There was new policies for the poor, big change, and all of that brought this situation. So it's very hard to understand how it went there.
In a way, this is a rebuke to what my colleague was just saying. You said France would never vote for the Le Pens. The fact is, a third of the population voted for Marine Le Pen in the last presidential election. Bolsonaro, the Brazilians are just as intelligent as the French, and they've elected this guy. And he is really, if anything, he's worse than Donald Trump. I mean, you look at that, he is sexist, homophobic, racist. He approves of torture. He's against democracy. I mean, he said the Brazilian Congress is useless. He wants to renew the civil war in Brazil. He says that the military regime didn't do enough. We need to kill 30,000 people. He's against the environment. He wants to, stop protecting the Amazon rainforest and this sort of thing. He doesn't take office till January 1st, but this guy is a disaster. I mean,
we're going to pick up on that point when we come back, how he will be in power on those issues like dealing with minorities and the environment. Stay with us. You're watching The World in 2019. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's a special year-end edition we are calling The World in 2019. The World this week throughout the year in partnership with The Daily Beast. Joining us, Laura Marlowe, Paris correspondent for The Irish Times. Welcome back to Hamdan Mostafavi, editor-in-chief of Courrier International, the weekly that brings you all of the best of the world's news translated into French. With us as well, Craig Kopitas, editor-at-large, TRT World, and Georg Blume, Paris correspondent for German weekly Die Zeit. Just before the break, Georg, we were discussing the arrival of Jair Bolsonaro to power. He arrives to power in the wake of the car wash scandal. And one of the questions is, and we saw it in Italy when there was a big anti-corruption drive, and that then born, after that came Berlusconi. In Brazil, this anti-corruption drive, this new era of transparency we live in, has brought this kick the bums out sentiment where this is the end result. Well, what conclusions do we draw?
I feel like Bolsonaro is a reflection of all these hopes which have been there just 10 years ago, where globalization was carrying us to new heights, and we had a very positive outlook on the 21st century. And now you see this anti-corruption drive in Brazil. 5 years ago, it started in China too. Xi Jinping started with an anti-corruption drive and made the country more nationalist. Brazil is going to be more nationalist during the next years. India maybe too. And those three countries which profited the most from globalization during 10, 20 years are now on a completely different footing. And it's not the US and Europe who's gonna, change politics there and give them a line and point out the direction. It's really the people there in Brazil, India, and China who will make history.
Kapitas, with the corruption nowadays, it's harder to hide it than it used to.
Well, it is, but at the same time, Latin America has a historical taste for exotic alcoholic cocktails, the tango, and right-wing dictatorships. France doesn't, by the way.
We're still having pastis.
Regime wasn't great.
And the French people got rid of Vichy, and I can tell you, coming from a French family,
Brazil.
It's never it's an important comparison. There, Brazil, Argentina, Chile. There's a long list. They like their right-wing military dictatorships down there. They come every
tense, no, for Argentina and Chile.
Well, they have liked. There is a history of them there.
Right.
And are they going through a cycle? Well, the last two governments in Brazil, which, as you said, were celebrated at Davos by Klaus Schwab, your fellow German. The greatest thing since sliced cheese. Look what they're doing. They're all in jail. Now, what does that tell us about globalization? I don't know. You're from Courier International. Let us know. What does the world think about this?
No, but I won't say they're back to dictatorship, but it's interesting. You started this section by comparing Bolsonaro to AMLO, the Andrés Manuel López Obrador in Mexico. They're very different politically, but they have, it's like the return of the caudillo. It's like the return of the big figures that's going to save us. Because all these countries, they haven't benefited from the economic boom. The inequalities have been, more and more powerful there. So
that's not true.
It is.
They have benefited.
Yeah,
they
but
have
not
come
everyone.
From very poor to low poor, and that's the big success story of globalization. But the political outcome.
But because of the anti-corruption drive, there's this perception that the people aren't benefiting,
and people are more educated. They now know what corruption means.
And the digital revolution also means that people see the inequality a lot more than they did before. I think that's a huge factor.
That's true. Even if the global power to grows and you have more economic power, you also have more feeling that you can't get what you want.
And violent crime is a huge factor in Brazil as well. People like Bolsonaro, because he says he's going to kill the criminals. Basically, he's going to crack down. He won't let this happen anymore.
And what do your readers make of his comments saying, "Look, preserving the Amazon rainforest, that's great. But I first need to feed the people, and agriculture has to come first."
Yeah, you see there and in the rest, even in France or in the US, like the ecological backlash. Like 3 years ago, everybody was, going all together in Paris to think about the ecology, and now it's like. No, economy is more important, but the problem is it's the model, it's the economic model.
Boy, now you put your finger on it. Just to double back for a second to the Gilets jaunes. One of the things many of them were telling me regarding the concept of wiping out national debts was that you took that money, the interest on the principal, in France's case, about $66 billion a year, and you turn that money into the green projects. And if there was this is their argument, not mine. If across the board, if you took and you erased all that debt, and you took that interest money or a portion of it, and you applied it to green models and sustainability, well, then you might be able to meet the Paris Accords. Now, that does not work in the current economic model, but what a clever idea, yes? Never happened, but clever.
Yeah, as Jair Bolsonaro ponders what to do about the Amazon rainforest, you could say California has seen the future, and it's definitely a dystopia. The so-called campfire killing 86, most of them in the retirement community of Paradise in the north of the state. There were fires elsewhere in California. While over here in Western Europe, Sweden experiencing its worst summer drought in 74 years, with the wildfires raging as far north as the Arctic Circle. In fact, 9 of the 10 warmest years on record for the planet have occurred since the start of this century. The 5 warmest have been since 2010, and we don't yet have the final statistics, Georg Blume, on 2018.
I think we have one hope with climate change, and we were just talking about Brazil, India, China. We're not going to solve, climate change with the Western developed countries. Only if we get a world economy more balanced with those big countries which have the numbers of people, really the billions on board. And it all looks very bad right now. But if China gets beyond coal, it's going to be a huge step, and they're on the way to do it. If Modi gets things right and India is not really getting into coal, there can be, if Africa is going to develop on a Chinese-based model with renewable energy, we shouldn't, when we look at what we're at now, everything is going bad and we're polluting more than ever before. We can despair at this moment.
Yeah, and what you're talking about takes really precise policy gymnastics, policies that can be enacted politically.
Takes determination.
Determination.
But there is political pressure, and we see it, for instance, in places like New Delhi or Beijing. The smog is a political issue, and the political leaders know they have to solve it because citizens aren't putting up with it.
I'm not as optimistic as the rest of you. I covered the COP21 3 years ago, and there was a lot of beautiful high-flying rhetoric and so on and so forth. And we just saw COP24 in Poland, and they always come to the lowest common denominator at the end. All of the fossil fuel producing countries exert maximum pressure to avoid change, to avoid restrictions. And what is it called? The GIEC in French, the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is the
UN climate scientists.
Exactly. The scientists, the experts, warned in October that instead of getting a 1.5 degree increase, I think it's by 2050, or no, it's by the end of the century, sorry, we're going to get 3.2 degree increase on the present trajectory, which is absolutely catastrophic. And it means more of these wildfires, it means epidemics, it means mass displacement of populations. Do you think the migration crisis we've had until now is bad? And the problem is all these countries are saying, well, I won't do it because he won't do it. And there's always going to be somebody who's not making an effort. I wish I could be optimistic. I mean, there are a few signs of hope. There's something called the High Ambition Coalition, which sort of spoke out in Katowice. There are 11 EU states that joined, not Poland, which was hosting the conference because they are 80% reliant on coal.
In fact, the conference took place in the coal basin.
And that, let's put some dollars and cents on what you just said. That same outfit said, with the carbon tax that everyone wants
the IPCC.
That wants to level. That would mean that according to their figures, by 2025, a gallon of gas would cost $44. By the beginning,
gallon of gas?
A gallon of gas, $44. I put it in
right now. The price is what in the U.S.
It's about
3 something.
3 something.
Yeah.
But you have to get away from punitive ecology. That's one thing we should learn. So, for example, from the Gilets jaunes. You've got to do things like invest massively in renewable energy, in public transportation. You have to discourage air traffic.
Where are you going to get the money? Where are you going to get the money?
I think now our only hope is that until now, climate change was something of the future. Now it's something of the present.
Right.
And there's been this...
And 2018's been a turning point?
Yeah, I think this summer, with everything that happened this summer, with the high temperature, with the fires, there's been more like a global consciousness that's happening now, and it's not happening in the future, it's happening now. And some of the things you just said, some of the figure you mentioned, are going to happen. We are not stopping climate change, but now people are going to revolt against the smog, against the fact that people are going to die from it. People are already dying from it. So that's the only way things are going to change and politicians are going to tackle the issue. If people start to die and to revolt, that's
I think there's a certain fatigue with the issue, though. I mean, every summit, every COP.
I'm desperate about Germany on this case. You know, we have the strongest Green Party on earth. We had the first very strong ecological movement, broad-based in all parties and so forth, and we are just not getting anywhere on this issue.
And why is that? Because you also have Volkswagen AG, you have Mercedes-Benz AG,
I'm
you have
telling
BMW.
you, the real big chance on this issue is China. They are doing the most in energy terms. And if China can show to the world with climate issues, they're going to be ahead of the West, we will have to follow them.
Well, you know,
that will be our incentive, to follow China on this issue.
You think Donald Trump is going to follow China?
Germany might have to follow before China. Do you know the Chinese right now, you know, all your 3 car companies, they all want to build in China, manufacture there?
Yes, of course.
It's really hard to build a car in China right now if you don't want to make it an electric car.
And
VW 2018 will be the year Volkswagen made this like firm commitment to making that switch to electric vehicles.
Right. Yeah. For China, they do it under pressure of China.
That's correct.
And you have Chinese bureaucrats who are terrible people, you know, who are putting those Muslims into camps. But they are maybe also the one who will get, you know, who will control their country in such a way that pollution is going to be, look at Japan in the 60s and 70s. What they did, the ecological turnaround of Japan was also, it was the bureaucrats who did it. And that is China's chance, and our chance.
They've done it in California, which is where I'm from. I remember smog in Los Angeles so bad you couldn't breathe and your eyes watered and this sort of thing. And Jerry Brown cleaned it up. So
and this brings us back to your original points about climate change, which is there are those who still argue that the most effective way to go about it is to count on the private sector to do it.
No, it's got to be mass governmental effort, I think. But also sociological, things like vegetarianism. I mean, one of the greatest sources of global warming is cattle, which if we all stopped eating meat tomorrow, it would go a huge way towards solving it.
Yeah, that was our issue this week. We had the Gilets jaunes and we had a special issue about should we stop eating meat at all. And all that thing, that's also part of the consciousness I was talking about, that people's consciousness, that this is happening now. It's not something for our great-grandchildren.
Did that sell well, this issue?
One final point on this.
Yeah, it did, actually. Yeah, just before Christmas, we have a sense of timing.
Yeah, you get a coupon. Buy the issue, get a free McDonald's.
All right, we now know that Georg Bloom is a turkey man for his end-of-year meals. 2019 will be the year Muhammadu Buhari tries for a second term in Nigeria. And there's another big election. We talk a lot about China, but among major economies in every year since the election of Narendra Modi in India, with the exception of 2017, it's India that's enjoyed bragging rights to the world's fastest growing economy, the rate last year topping 7%. So here's the question. Why are these people celebrating? Rajasthan, one of 3 states to go to the opposition ahead of next spring's general election. Those regional polls seen by the Indians as the semifinals ahead of the general election. Georg Blume, shouldn't Modi be doing 7% growth? Shouldn't he be doing much better at the polls?
These pictures are wonderful, you know. Congress Party, which was really down and nobody counted on it anymore, is back as a challenger. And, you know, Indians always like to outvote their governments. They don't get much
so
paid,
like the
you
French.
know. Well, I mean, the French get more from their state than Indians. The Indians have better reason to complain to their governments than the French, I think. And, I mean, they look at all the countryside in India, they're still so poor, and Modi didn't really change things for them. So there is always a threat that of democracy to him.
When he's elected in 2014, he promises, as he puts it, to put toilets before temples. Him hailing from the Hindu nationalist BJP party. How has he done on that?
No, but he has been governing on nationalism mostly, and he hasn't been tackling the issue of the agricultural poverty. India is still very a farmland country, and he hasn't solve the problem, those problems. So I think this victory in those regions came as a surprise, but I think it's announcing that he might not win this election.
What I see as alarming is the rise of Hindu nationalism. The fact that, as you mentioned, the BJP has built its success on Hindu nationalism, and Modi, who was a great friend of Barack Obama's, who Macron also gets on very, very well with him. He's a charismatic leader, but he has an alliance with an extremist Hindu nationalist leader in Rajasthan, Yogi Adityanath. I'm probably mispronouncing his name. Sorry, he's in Uttar Pradesh, not in Rajasthan. And he wants to build a giant statue of the Hindu god Ram on the site of a Muslim temple. I mean, a Muslim mosque, sorry, or a Hindu temple. There are Hindu militias going around, attacking Muslims in Rajasthan. And the Congress party, the opposition, which defeated the BJP in these regional elections, it had built its reputation on being secular. And Rahul Gandhi, the leader of the party, now is starting to visit Hindu temples as well. And that was their main distinction between the BJP and the Congress party. So we see more and more, again, this sectarian nationalism, which in the world's largest democracy.
Yeah, sectarian nationalism.
But I don't think Gandhi can erase the secularism of the Congress party by some election stand-ups. I think that is for the election trail. It's not for the soul of the party.
It's a bit like the right in France, actually, which is constantly under pressure to be more right-wing. To go more towards Le Pen type policies. He's being accused. The Congress has been accused over and over of being the Muslims' party. And they're trying to lose that reputation.
All right, that sectarian nationalism, as you describe it, also has a foe abroad. It's no longer so much Pakistan as you might think, but another neighbor, China. Modi, who recently rewarded the Maldives' new president with $1.4 billion in financial aid to get out of a big debt trap laid by a big infrastructure spending in the Maldives, an airport extension and a sea bridge built by the Chinese.
Our countries share a similar interest in upholding security. We are also both of the same view that we must remain alert about each other's interests and concerns, so as to ensure stability throughout the region. At the same time, we will not allow each other's territories to be used for any activity that can be harmful to our interests.
What do you make of India's incumbent, Craig Kapitas?
I love all of India. You go out there, spend any time reporting in the region, you come back with the notion that India is China's greatest nightmare. And the reason is, India is a democracy. A messy, dirty, loud, boisterous democracy. And that's got to scare the Chinese. Yeah, it's got problems, but I look at India and, it kind of sounds cynical sometimes. I always look at India as the great hope of democracy spreading. Because this is what? There's a few billion people live there? And the Chinese say, oh, we have too many people to have a democracy. We have to control it, the Communist Party. No, you don't. Look at India. What a wonderful place. And what great food.
And on that note, we're going to turn to our panel now and ask them, as we prepare for 2019, we've heard a lot of the hazards that could await us. What's the book to read to arm ourselves for the adventure of the next 365 days? I'll begin with you, Craig Kapitas.
Oh, Cannibalism in the Cars by Mark Twain. Look, you got to know about America. Politicians, preachers, corrupt journalists, nagging wives, gullible American electorate. You can read about pranks, hoaxes, and the plumb stupidity of America's idiotic self-deceptions and vain conceits. This is classic Americana. It has applications not only in the States right now, but abroad. Read it. It's Mark Twain.
Man, all of Mark Twain you laugh out loud on almost every page.
Every page.
Lara Marlowe.
I recommend very heartily a book titled The Retreat of Western Liberalism, How Democracy is Defeating Itself.
That's not a chuckler.
No, it's not funny. It was written by Edward Luce, who's a columnist for the Financial Times based in Washington. And I think basically every issue we have talked about tonight relates to this. The challenge to liberal Democrats like Emmanuel Macron, who are facing this nationalist populist challenge in Europe, the rise of Donald Trump, Brexit. I could go on, but it all comes back to this, that when the Berlin Wall fell in 1989, we thought we'd reached the sunlit uplands. We thought it was, as Francis Fukuyama said, the end of history. And what a rude awakening we've had, because liberal democracy has failed. It's failed to stop income inequality. It's failed to stop the impoverishment of the middle classes. And it is really on the way out. And unless we do something really dramatic to resuscitate it and revive it and change its failure to, it's over deregulation, failure to punish corrupt bankers. And look what happened after the financial crisis a decade ago. Lloyd Blankfein of Goldman Sachs got a $9 million bonus that year. Unless
It was scheduled for 20.
Yeah, poor Lloyd. I mean, and I think that there is still hope, but you've got to give people hope for the future. They can't, the healthcare cost in America, the cost of a college education for your children, somewhere it's all gone wrong. And Edlus explains how we got to where we are and offers some remedies for it.
Georg Blume?
I have Afrotopia for you. See, we didn't talk about Africa. That's what you have to read. And my daughter is just starting her African studies. She was raised in China and Japan and India. So she's looking for Africa. And Africa is indeed, a story which is very open.
Is it a utopia or a dystopia?
No, it's a utopia. It's Selvin Starr, he was writing for Macron this year on the theft of, these old statues in the Louvre, and he's giving us a positive outlook what could happen in Africa. And I think our future, especially for Europe, is in Africa. If we don't, we will have a demographic explosion in Africa anyway. They're gonna all be with us, around us, and that's where we can still invest, where we can create new functioning of the economy. And if we are not creative about Africa, we'll lose out. I think even Merkel, our chancellor, said last year, we've looked a lot to Asia, now it's time to look to Africa.
Hamdan Mustafavi?
Well, I chose I chose a graphic novel about Iraq, which is called The Smell of Iraq, Le Parfum d'Irak in French, which was written by a French Iraqi journalist. I chose this book because I think it's important that we talk sometimes of the Middle East not only with figures and bombs and so it's a story about how this country changed, and it goes back to the roots of the crisis in Iraq now, in the rest of Middle East, and the rise of terrorism, the rise of Daesh. But all this told as a story, as a human story of one person, of families in Iraq, and so you get a close look to how life goes on. In the middle of war, in the middle of all these geopolitical bets, and it's very nice way to look at it.
And it makes it real. So the perfume of Iraq, we'll leave it with the perfume of Iraq. Hamdan Mustafavi, many thanks. I want to thank Georg Blume, Craig Kapitas, Lara Marlowe. Thank you for joining us here for this special edition, and a happy new year to all of you from all of us.